web series and podcast created by Temple of Geek. At the core of the project is the importance of telling the stories of women who have found inspiration, growth, and power through fandom. My name is Jenna Wren, and I'm the host of the Portrait of a Fangirl podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to the owner of the romance bookstore, The Ripped Bodice, Leah Koch. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very good.
Thank you for being here. Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Very excited to talk to you. So can you please just introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name's Leah, and I am one of the owners of the Ripped Bodice bookstore. We are a romance-only bookstore. We were the first one in the country when we opened a little over 8 years ago. And we now have 2 locations. Our original location is in Los Angeles, and we opened in Brooklyn, New York in August of this year. So we are now bi-coastal. The other owner is my sister, I should mention. And we specialize in the celebration of romance novels. So we sell every single romance novel type that you could possibly think of. We probably have it. And that is what we love to do. And we love meeting readers and writers from all over the country.
Wonderful. It's such an interesting concept, the all romance bookstore. And that's really what caught my attention. It's unique. It's a unique thing. You don't see it.
So when we opened, we were the first one in the United States, actually the Northern Hemisphere. There was one in Australia.
Oh, wow.
At the time that we opened. And then we were alone for a while. And then there was maybe 1 or 2 other ones for, again, a while, pretty much up to the pandemic. But since the pandemic, there's been like 8 opened in the past year or something crazy like that. So it's really spreading across the country. But we were the first ones crazy enough to do that.
To take that step. Well, I know I will get distracted because I want to talk all about your bookstore, but we're going to save it for a little bit later.
Sure.
So I just want to ask you first that something we always ask our guests is how they view the term fangirl and what being a fangirl means to them. So for you, how do you view the term fangirl?
Okay, well, I'm like a very literal linguistic person, so let's think about definitions here. Yeah, let's go with person who enjoys something. Girl, gender expansive definition.
Yep.
So let's go with gender expansive women who enjoy things as my personal definition.
Yeah. I notice it's become quite a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a non-gendered term too, because anyone can fangirl. Anyone can be a fangirl of something.
Right. Well, because then fangirl is like a verb too. You know, it's like an action to sort of like emote over something. And I just think language in general is getting less gendered, which is great. Yeah, I think, what was the second part of the question? Like, what does it mean to you? Or
yeah, has that term changed over time since you've grown?
Yes, definitely. I think it's interesting. I have no idea how old you are, but I feel like the trajectory of sort of solid middle millennials, which is what I am.
Yeah, me too.
is very much like a public consciousness of liking things, which is not to say, obviously, that older people don't like things. Right. I just feel like during my lifetime, there has been like a much more, it's probably the internet, obviously, is what it is. But I just feel like it becomes like a much larger part of your personal life or your leisure time. Like, okay, yes, as I'm saying this out loud, like, duh, it's the internet. So like, yeah. You know, I got Facebook when I was in like, I want to say middle school. And then I think I got a cell phone. I don't know. It was probably like 16 maybe. I don't know. I grew up in the big city, but it just like reinforced this idea that like whatever you are into, there are people all over the world who are probably into that too. And now you can talk to them.
Right.
And I think as I have grown up, there have been a lot of discussions about, you know, especially things that women like. And this is like kind of my whole job. I sell a traditionally denigrated thing.
Yep.
And we could talk more about that. But, whether it's music or movies or, it was like One Direction became really popular when I was like, I don't know, 14, 15. Somebody fact check me. I was like a little, it was never really my thing, but it became this thing. And then there was all these articles about like, people don't like it because their fans are young girls. And that cycle, like, it repeats itself all the time. Like, we went through that same cycle with 50 Shades of Grey, except it was older women. Like, sorry, I'm rambling, but
no, it's true. There's like it's almost slightly stigmatized, the things that women really get hyped over.
Oh, not slightly.
Slightly, yeah, very much.
Slightly.
Like I think of the Twilight series when that became huge. Yep.
Exactly. Right. You like compare. Yes, 100%. I have always prided myself on liking things with enthusiasm. And, I feel like when I was in high school, there was like a, it's cool to care kind of movement. Cause like, teenagers were like, I don't care about anything.
What was the first moment you really found yourself fangirling over something?
Gosh, I'm trying to cast my mind back. I'm sure you hear this all the time, and we don't have to dwell on it very long, but it was Harry Potter, and that's disappointing now as a member of the queer community. It's like fairly devastating, but I don't want to lose the, nice memories. And, especially those memories were going to bookstores for midnight releases.
Right.
And now I own a bookstore and we have midnight releases for adults. So that's fun. After that, actually, it was the Chicago Cubs.
Really?
Yeah, I am from Chicago, and brief baseball history lesson. The Chicago Cubs are generally really, really, really bad, and were really, really, really bad for like a century, kind of famously. And then a while ago now, we had a we finally got good, and then we finally made it to the World Series, and we finally won. And it was like, I like sports, but it was like genuinely, we were like running down our street with Chicago flags. Like, it was very exciting.
That's so much fun.
Yeah. And I think that was also like, the cool thing about sports is like, you get invested for a season. This was actually, I think it was like one of the first 2 years that the store was open. And so I didn't have any employees. And I literally would like put on the Cubs game almost every day because they play like freaking every day for 4 hours while I was like, shelving books or whatever. Yeah, I think that's a good fandom run.
Yeah, it's interesting because that has come up in a few interviews I've done, that sports is a fandom as well. And it's a really, I guess you don't necessarily think of it right away, at least for me, because I think, fandom, I think of like nerdy things, but sports is legitimately a fandom too.
Yeah, and it's been something like, so I think I felt very like not included. I was like, there is no place for me to watch football, baseball, like men's sports. And then like, when I became more immersed in the queer community, I was like, oh my God, women's sports, this is great. So I'm like a huge women's soccer fan. And I just watched the women's March Madness this weekend, and I love the Olympics. The Olympics are like my most favorite time of year. I like watch everything, and I like love all the human interest stories.
It's every time it comes along, I forget how much I love it, and then the Olympics start and I'm like, oh boy, right back to the beginning again.
It's so excited. I like literally block it out of my calendar. I'm like, I just want to sit in front of the TV for 6 hours and watch javelin and freaking like, I like the obscure sports like canoeing, and it's trampoline. I love trampoline.
Oh, I loved, oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Curling it's so good.
Classic. I mean, it's like you're an expert in 15 minutes. I don't know anything about curling.
Yeah, nothing.
So there's Summer Olympics this summer, and then the next Summer Olympics are in Los Angeles, where
Yep.
I have a store. So I'm really excited about that.
That's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing if you do anything like themed for it. That would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, yes. You can also look on our Instagram, the last Summer Olympics it was supposed to be 2020, but then it was 2021. I did a whole Olympics themed window display, and I was very proud of it.
I love that. That's so much fun because you can embrace your fandom at your store. That's really fun to do.
I can do whatever I want. So it was only women. And it was like all my favorite female athletes. And I had all these like big cutouts. I think there were we had a lot. It was like 12, 15 or something. And I did not have room to store those. So then I gave them to the local middle school for them to display or, do whatever they want with.
That's a lot of fun. Oh my God, the kids probably loved that. That's a cool thing. So I want to get into talking about your bookstore. You have, as you mentioned, 2 bookstores, one in California and one in New York, both called the Ripped Bodice. And I came across your shop on social media and it caught my attention immediately. Like I had mentioned, there's really not many other stores out there like yours. So the idea of an all-romance bookstore where people can be completely open and fangirl over a specific genre is really welcoming. So can you tell me a bit about the history of the shop and how you and your sister took it from an idea into reality?
So her name is B, and way back in 2015, we were both finishing educational experiences. So I was finishing my undergraduate in college and she was finishing her graduate degree. And we had both done a very classic decide that the career path that we were interested in was actually not what we wanted to do.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. And we were both like facing this moment of like, well, okay, now what? And we were really just talking one day, sort of like, is there a dream job that we can design for ourselves? It was really important to me. I wanted to work for myself. Like, I don't like having a boss. I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted. And we actually like each other. So we were like, it would be fun to go into business together. She was living on the East Coast and I was on the West Coast at that point. We hadn't lived in the same city for a while. The initial idea that we had was like just shop, like, and that was like, we should be shopkeepers because it'll be like we're on Gilmore Girls and like
that's so cute.
And let me tell you something, it is really not, but the notion seemed like very romantic to us, which I think it is for a lot of people. Once again, it is not. And so I really, the conversation truly went like this. Okay, the shop sells like things we like. So it's like kind of a gifty boutique thing. Well, we like books, so the shop should sell books. The books that we like are romance novels, so we should sell romance novels. What if we only sold romance novels? At that point, we were like, oh, tons of other people are doing this, which quick Google search told us they were not. Right. And in the classic fashion of being at the time 22 and 24 years old, we were, instead of the fact that no one was doing it scaring us off, we were like, well, clearly there's a huge hole in the market and we are the ones to fill this. And particularly, I'm like more of the numbers financial person. And I was like, these people have so much money to spend and no one is taking their money. Like, I would love to take their money in addition to, providing an awesome space. But because we are a woman-owned business, because we do romance novels, like people sort of forget about the financial aspect.
Right.
But I was like, this is a really good business idea. And once again, due to the naivete of youth, we were like, great. The fact that we have absolutely no money is a bit of a problem. But also the fact of our age and lack of business experience means no bank is going to give us money. So we decided to crowdfund on Kickstarter.
Oh.
It was very nerve-wracking, but we were ultimately successful at raising $90,000.
Oh, wow.
Mainly from complete strangers who didn't live in California, but were really excited by the idea of a space for romance readers, like a brick and mortar space, and, giving it legitimacy in independent bookstore world and publishing worlds. And I mean, all this time later, I still can't believe like strangers just like gave us money. I still meet people we meet people all the time who are, our original Kickstarter backers, and they have like a tote bag that we don't produce anymore because it was just for that.
Right.
We started looking for a space while the Kickstarter was going on. We took very seriously the notion that people were going to give us money, and we knew Kickstarters have a tendency to, sometimes take a long time. And also we were finishing school, and we were like, okay, we got to do this. So we finished the Kickstarter in October of 2015, and then we opened on March 4th, 2016.
Oh, wow. Quick turnaround.
Yeah, because we weren't doing anything else. We were like working night and day on this. When we opened, we had 0 employees. It was me and B. So if the store was open, one of us was there. And we didn't have any employees until, I think it was towards the end of our second year. We just had our 8th birthday for LA in March. And now between our 2 locations, we have 20 employees.
Okay. So yeah, you've grown a lot in that time.
Yes.
So something I also really love is the name. I think the name completely captures the essence of what you're doing, what you're selling. How did you come up with that name? What inspired it?
All credit for the name goes to B. So a little backstory. Romance novels in mainly the 70s and early 80s were almost all historical, like picture, like super stereotypical, like girl in a big dress on the front, shirtless guy, maybe. And they were referred to as bodice rippers because they often featured a literal scene of somebody ripping a bodice, which I always point out, by the way, is extremely hard to do. There's a lot of laces and boning and blah, blah, blah. And it was used as a derogatory term. It was like, oh, those silly bodice rippers on the rack at the grocery store. So fast forward a lot of years. B is doing her graduate thesis at NYU in fashion history. And her thesis is about the clothes in historical romance novels. And she came up with the name Mending the Ripped Bodice. So then when we're doing the store, we were like, oh, like Ripped Bodice is so good. Like, I wish we could use that. And then my friend Laura was like, you are plagiarizing yourself. You came up with it. I think we tried to come up with something else, but we just felt like it was so emblematic of what we wanted to do in terms of reclaiming language, eliminating stigma, having fun with it, being tongue-in-cheek. When we launched our Kickstarter, there was a very large portion of the romance community who hated the name vehemently.
Really?
And sent us very mean emails that I've never forgotten.
Oh.
But it's interesting. And it was exclusively women over 50, probably even 60. They felt like it was a derogatory term, which it was, but
right.
That's the whole point of language. You change it, you reclaim it, and you do what you want with it. But I still think it's the perfect name.
It's such a great name. And that was actually one of the first things that I noticed was the name. It's such a great name. It stands out. It's awesome. And it kind of reminds me really of what the goal was here with this podcast. And it was reclaiming the name fangirl, because a lot of times fangirl is viewed in a very derogatory term. It's kind of like, I guess you could say simplified. People are like, oh, it's a little girl thing, but it's not. It's such a huge thing. And I think that that's something the Ripped Bodice is showing as well.
For sure.
As you mentioned earlier, you have one shop in Southern California and you have one shop in Brooklyn. Did you ever plan or expect to expand to 2 coasts?
Yes.
You did? Okay.
Yes. Our initial, brainstorming, like when we were working on our business plan, before we did the Kickstarter, before we did anything, there were 17 different parts of the business. And it was, a global empire. Obviously, we then had to scale it back and start with one thing, but we have always both been ambitious, been candid about the word ambition. My least favorite question, not that you're going to ask this, but I get asked it all the time, is like, did you think you were going to be this successful? And I'm like, can you imagine if the answer was no?
Right.
What business would I have taking other people's money and pouring all this work into this? Of course I thought I was going to be successful.
Right. You have to believe in your idea in order for it to be
Exactly.
something.
And in fact, we know ourselves so well that when we opened the first store, we were like, you cannot do anything else for 3 years.
Right.
You have to, grow the roots and build a really solid foundation. We actually ended up making it about 4 years before we started talking about expansion, which funnily enough was January of 2020.
Of course.
And so then obviously that got put on hold for a while.
Right.
But yes, so I don't know that we knew where, the next ones would be, but expansion was definitely always part of the plan.
See, that was going to be my next question was, did you plan New York? Was New York always something in your mind?
That is harder to answer. No, not really. Like it was just like the amorphous idea of, another location. Because at that point, we didn't have the rest of our family there, which we do now, which is ultimately why we ended up there. In addition to it being New York and making
Right.
very good financial sense, our brother and his wife and their 2 boys live there, and our dad and our stepmom live there.
Okay. So it's convenient. It's convenient for you guys.
Exactly. And something I really learned, from the first store to the second, because by the time we opened the second store, Bee's married, she's staying in California. And I was basically deciding between a location where I knew not one single person and a location with a lot of my family. And they probably both would have been good business decisions, but you have to think about, I was there for a year building the store and working, and to have an actual support system makes a huge difference.
Right. It would have been a lot harder if you were completely an island unto yourself.
Yes.
But I feel like Brooklyn is such a great place because it's, if you know the culture of Brooklyn and how niche it is, I feel like the store just, when I saw you were in Brooklyn, I'm like, that's perfect. That's so perfect.
We could not fit in better. It's so great. It's like,
it's so perfect.
And, you're taking a gamble, on when you're picking, your spot. And we looked at a lot of different storefronts and streets, and I'm like so happy with where we ended up, because it's just like our neighbors are great and the people are great, and we fit in well in Brooklyn.
So what kind of atmosphere can visitors expect when they walk into one of your stores?
It's something that's really important to me. I mean, it obviously varies, depending on what kind of knowledge of romance you're coming in with. But regardless of that, we want it to be fun and welcoming and I think unapologetic about what we're doing. It's a very there's a lot of pink. Pink is not for everybody. It's not for everybody. You don't have to like pink, but like, this is what we're doing.
It's a romance store. You got to lean into it.
A romance bookstore. Aside from let's pretend that the person coming in like has some decent amount of romance knowledge. We want you to feel like this is a space that is for you and celebrates the thing that you like, and that carries across everything. From like, any staff member you talk to is gonna like know about what you're talking about. People that you bump into in the aisles like might have recommendations because like they're into the same thing too. We try to be just a really fun place to visit. And because it's brick and mortar, we understand like you have made the trek to get here, whether you live around the corner or you live in Germany. Like, we want to make it worth it that you have come to this physical space. So we want it to be an experience. There's a reason like I spend so much time on decorating and hanging books from the ceiling. And there's, things to read on the walls. Like, we want to make it worth your while.
And I love that. I really want to go into Brooklyn. I live about a 2-hour drive, from Brooklyn. And I'm like, I need to go in there. I need to go check this out.
It's a bit of a trek, but listen, we get people from Australia and,
That's true. Well, that's just New York traffic. I'm always going to hit some sort of traffic. But on this podcast, as I mentioned earlier, we often touch on the term fangirl and how it's been stigmatized over the years, and how there's a lot of times a negative connotation along with it. And in a similar vein, the romance genre has suffered from that exact treatment. So for so long, many people have associated romance with the Fabio covers, the Nicholas Sparks-esque plots. How do you respond to people who have this static view of an entire subplot of fiction?
Well, it really depends on my mood. Because, I get asked to do it about 12 times a day. So, and it really depends on the person. And, I think there's a difference between someone who is interested in having a conversation with you and someone who just wants to, be belligerent.
Right.
So for the purposes of this, let's pretend that it's a person who's actually, interested in engaging. What's really actually interesting to me about just the way that you phrased the question is that the two people that you mentioned are both men. Up front, I want to say romance novels are read and written by people of all genders. However, it is impossible to talk about this without talking about institutional misogyny, internal misogyny, blatant misogyny, all kinds of misogyny. I don't want to reduce it just to men and women because it's more complicated than that. But the answer to the question, if we're literally answering the question, is misogyny. Period. Subcolon. Racism, homophobia, other hatred of various groups of people. You could stop there because that really is the answer. People don't love it when I stop there because they're like, "Can you expand?" This goes back to exactly what we were saying at the beginning. For a very long time, the majority of romance novels were consumed by women. The majority of them were produced by women in a publishing industry that was almost exclusively men. The only people who were working, not only, but a lot of the women who were working in publishing were working on a romance imprint. I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone who's watching this that American society doesn't do great with that scenario.
Nope.
Then you add in the sex factor that a lot of these books, not all, even to this day, not all, contain sex on levels ranging from, and then they kissed and the book ends, to very graphic and, oh, by the way, we're not married, and by the way, we're both men, or one of us is a sea creature. When we get into America's morality problem, books that contain sex that women are reading and enjoying equals bad. And all of that just conspires and layers over each other in time. You add in homophobia, you add in racism, you're keeping out non-white authors from being traditionally published, and you end up with a toxic soup of a lot of people I meet that think there's something wrong with romance novels, but can't actually pinpoint why they think that. It's interesting to talk to people because I'm like conducting, human experiments on people.
You go into the Ripped Bodice and you get human experimented on.
Exactly. Because I'm like interviewing people because I'm especially older women. It's all different kinds of people, but you say, okay, so have you ever read a romance novel?
Right.
Like, a lot of times the answer is no, but did anyone in your life read them? Mom, grandma, aunt? Did somebody make comments about the silly trash that person was reading? Yes, dad, grandpa, uncle. And it's not that person thinks that. It's just you hear that and you start internalizing it, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, maybe actually everything I've been told about this is wrong. Young people are so much better at recognizing that, and hopefully will only continue to get better. I meet young people all the time, readers from, 16 to 25, and they don't understand why they would care what someone else thought about what they're reading. And I'm like, yes, absolutely, never care.
Right, that's how it should be, but it's a generational thing, I believe.
Absolutely. And then I talk to, my friends' moms, and they're just, and again, they don't want to be, hurtful or anything, but they're just, I just prefer serious literature.
Right.
It takes a lot more unlearning. And again, there's layers on layers to this. I think, especially for older generations, this goes back to like America's ideas about leisure and fun and like doing something for no reason. Like, I think a lot of older people feel that reading must have a purpose, whether it's academic or, you're supposed to broaden your mind and learn things and whatever. For some reason, you can't do that if it's, a romance novel because of, again, a variety of reasons. So as you can see, I can go on the subject for a very long time, but it's getting better.
I think the younger generations, they're doing it right. They're really doing it right.
Yes.
What would you say to romance fangirls who are hesitant to let their love for the genre really show?
If that's the way you want to be, that's fine. If you want to just enjoy your books at the library or in your house, and that's totally fine. However, if you feel like you want to connect with other romance readers and you feel like something's holding you back, there are so many more spaces these days to do that where you're just not going to encounter the freaking Jonathan friends and fanboys. Again, going back to sort of like the internet and like the niche corners of things, like you have to wade through like so much less bullshit. Can I swear on this? I don't know. And there's just like so much specificity. If you only want to talk to somebody about like monster romance, like orcs and gargoyles and stuff, like there are dozens of TikTok groups and, Twitter book clubs and, there's just so many more places for that. And I also think, kind of the nice thing about the internet is like you can be as, engaged as you want. Like if you just want to lurk in like a chat room and like take comfort in like what people are talking about and like get book recommendations. Reddit, by the way, has like amazing romance book recommendations. Like you don't ever have to like say anything. Going back to what we were talking about a second ago, like, do a little soul searching on why you're feeling nervous or embarrassed, and obviously there's a huge variety of reasons. Like, if you have social anxiety, like that's different than like, right. Feeling like there's something inherently wrong with the books that you're reading. And people come from so many different experiences. I talk to people who've grown up in very religious environments a lot. And when they find romance novels and, if they've grown up in purity culture, it can be, really empowering and freeing. And it can be a little jarring if you're, obviously not used to that. But there are so many experiences that people bring. And if you ultimately come to the conclusion that you're just happy reading your books, go on with your bad self.
Just go read your books. Enjoy them. Right? That's what they're for.
Part of reading is like, it can be a solitary activity or it can be something super social. Like that's what a book club is.
Right.
And then there's like kind of something in the middle if you just want to like, make some TikToks or watch other people's TikToks.
I think that's why Book Talk is so great because, again, like you were saying, you can interact as much as you want or not, but there's so many recommendations. And now I see it being brought onto like Amazon. They have a whole section that's like best of Book Talk. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's amazing how it's expanded.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the best part of, something like Book Talk or really any of these things is it's also just like, to a certain extent, which I'll get to in a second, democratizing things a bit. It's not reviewers deciding like what's good and cool. Like it's some 15-year-old girl in her bedroom in Ohio. Yeah. So it can, and it can be really fun to see what other people your age are reading, or maybe someone who's in like a totally different, place in their life. I do want to mention there is an issue with TikTok, social media in general, obviously, but TikTok algorithm is racist. So it is, always going to raise white authors' work to the top. So I do want to encourage people to be intentional about seeking out TikTokers of color who are promoting authors of color, because otherwise, if you just rely on the algorithm, you're only going to end up with white stuff. And there's so much better stuff out there.
Right. So the Ripped Bodice hosts many events that are specifically focused on the queer community. And I find that fantastic, especially as a member of the queer community myself, and, that not being something I saw growing up. For instance, you have events like a Queer Lit Book Club and the Queer Romance Book Club. Have you noticed a rise in queer romance fiction?
Yes, definitely. Quite starkly in just the time that I've been doing this. So when we opened, again, this was about 8 years ago, in our LGBTQ plus section, this is a little insidery, but when you look at the spines of all the books, they were all coming from like 2 to 3 really niche independent publishers. There's nothing on there that's coming from Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, these big publishers. The mainstreaming of things improves access. Now, if you look at that same section, you're going to see books from 20 different publishers, just, a lot more variety, a lot more traditionally published queer romances. Now, let's not give anyone too many cookies. Out of like all the books they're publishing that year, like a tiny fraction of them are queer. Like, let's not give anyone awards for quite yet. But it's a quite significant improvement, and it's quite fast. Frankly, a lot faster than improvement in publishing more authors of color. The interesting thing is there's still, we're still, gay people just started like 15 years ago. So we're still early, and, they just appeared out of nowhere. So, you're still primarily going to have like contemporary romances. Like it's always going to be harder, to have like a queer fantasy or a queer historical, because like you're already weird. So you can't like add another weird thing. And same goes, it's always going to be easier for a queer white author to get published than a queer author of color. But, we're really starting to see books with asexual representation, polyamory, trans heroes and heroines, non-binary characters. Like it's just, we're definitely just continuing to expand, which is great. There's some really great stuff coming out this year. Obviously, it all comes out in May and June because queer books can't come out the rest of the year.
Right.
So make sure you stock up then. There's really good stuff coming out. I'm just kidding. They don't really know. I should actually run the numbers on that. I'm sure.
I'm sure it's probably like a ridiculous percentage increase, right?
Out in May and June.
So what is the general response that you get from attendees of these events?
Oh, it's so great. It's just, queer people are the best, obviously. Our first like queer book club in Brooklyn, there were like 50 people there.
I'm not surprised.
It was just so great. And with, different ages, and it's Brooklyn, so they have probably more opportunities than, some of the rest of the country. But the gays get stereotyped like everything else. Like, maybe they don't want to play kickball or, go clubbing. Like, gays like reading too.
What do you think is one of your most popular events?
Actually, our most popular event in Los Angeles is our stand-up comedy show. We do a free stand-up show on the third Thursday of every month. We've been doing it since the beginning of the store. It's called Romantic Comedy. It's people really love it in our community, and especially because it's free. There aren't always like a ton of free things to do in LA. Again, back to our ethos of everything. You're very likely to find, unlikely to find many straight white male comics on the lineup. They do appear, and let me tell you, it can be a very humbling experience for them. I have seen people bomb. It's funny.
It's one of those know your audience type of thing, right?
And then the people who like really embrace where they are, like people just love them. I love when I've seen the show a bazillion times. I don't do the booking, by the way. It's two local wonderful comics who, organize everything. When people like really embrace where they are, it's great. And we do that show in New York as well, but we just started, so it's not quite as long running. Yeah, I think otherwise it kind of depends on, who the author is. We have been doing, I mentioned before, we've done a couple of midnight release parties this year for the first time for some like really big fantasy books that people were excited about. And let me tell you, it was just like, I felt like I was going to cry. It was so fun. Like, just seeing all these adults, it was at midnight, excited enough about a book to show up at midnight on a weekday. We had games and like cocktails, and it was really, really fun.
That's a lot of fun. And I think that for people around my age, like, the older millennials, it's a lot sense of nostalgia too for a time where that was so popular. So
Absolutely.
Bringing that back is just fantastic.
Absolutely. It's just, I was like, the last time I've been to a midnight book release would have been for the fourth Twilight. I think I was like 17 or 18. I remember going to the Barnes & Noble in Chicago. Yeah, I think that was the last time I would have gone to a midnight release party.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not as immersed as I was when I was in my early 20s in the book culture like I used to be, but Twilight was just a phenomenon unto itself. There's not many things that reach that level.
So true.
What advice would you give to someone out there who wants to make a business out of their fandom?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. And I promise I'm going to give it, but I want to say first, really consider if you want to do that. I grew up in a if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life kind of vibe. And like anytime I expressed like an interest in something, my dad, who's amazing and I love, was like, how can we monetize this? Now, as an adult, I have realized that there is a lot of benefit and joy in keeping something free of labor, monetization, whatever. One of my other hobbies is I make quilts. As it was my fashion, I was like, I'm going to sell these. And then I was like, wow, I really don't like doing this anymore. Which is not to say I don't like books anymore. I obviously love them. But it changes your relationship to the thing. It really does. So I'm not discouraging you, but I don't think I thought enough about it when I was doing it. Just spend some time thinking about it. Think about and think about how you're going to feel when other people's opinions become a big part of your life and your interaction with this thing. Now, that being said, let's say you decide to do it, which I am encouraging of. The biggest advice I have as it relates to business, particularly small business, is be authentic. I think that is a big part of the reason we're so successful. From the Kickstarter on, we were sharing with the people who gave us money, like, oh, here's what we're doing, like, here's the furniture we're buying, like, it's so exciting, blah, blah, blah. I think people really responded to that and felt like, they were a part of it. Many years on, we're sort of constantly reminding people, like, we don't have corporate overlords. Like, we just like do what we want because we think it's fun.
Right.
And I think that will only continue to set you apart as our world grows increasingly conglomerated and dominated by, everything sold by 5 companies kind of vibes.
Right.
My other advice, especially if you are like if you are more of like sort of a creative person, which I would consider myself, like obviously I have to do like money stuff for my job, is identify the things you are not good at and pay people for them. Even you have to consider, like, even when you think you have no money, for example, we had no money. And so I did our bookkeeping for 2 years. And I was very, very terrible at it. And so when I could afford to hire someone to do it, I had to pay so much money for them to fix everything that I had messed up that it would have been cheaper to just hire them from the beginning.
Wow.
So that might be something different for every person. Like, I mean, for me, it's like taxes and accounting, but maybe you suck at graphic design or you suck at, I can't think of other things, but there is a real benefit and value to like evaluating your own skill set and recognizing when it would be beneficial to you to let somebody else do it.
That's very good advice. And I think that on that note, where can we find the Ripped Bodice on social media and in person?
So many places.
Yeah.
We are the Ripped Bodice on pretty much all social media. And our website is therippedbodice.com. We ship all over the world. So even if you can't come in person, we'd be delighted to send you things. You can get signed books, you can get t-shirts, you can get all kinds of stuff. And then if you do happen to either live close to or be traveling to either Los Angeles or New York, in Los Angeles, we're located in a neighborhood called Culver City, which is pretty close to the airport if you have a layover. And in New York, we're in the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn. And we have directions and all those things on our website. And we'd love to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Leah. This has been such a great conversation. Very interesting to learn about your journey here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.